The old man's trembling hand reached toward the emergency button. No one came. Patients walked past his wheelchair without a second glance. 2 nurses hurried down the hallway, too busy arguing over their shift schedules to notice the elderly man struggling to breathe. His vision blurred. His chest tightened. For a brief moment, he thought this was how his life would end, not in his luxurious mansion, surrounded by family, but alone in the crowded hallway of the very hospital he had built decades earlier. Then he heard a voice. "Sir, are you all right?" A young woman wearing a faded blue cleaning uniform dropped her mop and rushed toward him without hesitation. She had no idea that the man gasping for air in front of her owned one of the largest healthcare companies in Africa. And that the decision she made over the next 5 minutes would change both of their lives forever. Earlier that morning, the alarm rang at exactly 5 o'clock. Amina reached over and switched it off before it could wake her mother. The tiny one-room apartment was still dark. Rainwater had leaked through the ceiling again during the night, leaving small puddles on the cracked cement floor. She quietly picked up an old bucket and emptied it outside before preparing breakfast. Breakfast was simple. A cup of tea. 2 slices of bread. She placed the larger portion in front of her mother. "You should eat more," her mother said softly. Amina smiled. "I'm not very hungry." It was a lie. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in 2 days. But her mother's medicine mattered more. After helping her mother take her pills, Amina checked the nearly empty bottle. Only enough remained for 3 more days. She glanced toward the envelope hidden beneath the tablecloth. Inside were unpaid medical bills. She folded it shut without saying a word. Her mother noticed anyway. "I'm sorry you've had to sacrifice so much for me." Amina gently squeezed her hand. "You took care of me when I was little." She smiled. "Now it's my turn." Outside, the streets of Accra were already alive. Vendors arranged fruit on wooden tables. Children in school uniforms laughed as they hurried toward buses. Construction workers gathered around roadside tea stalls. Amina boarded an overcrowded bus, standing the entire 40-minute journey because every seat had already been taken. Nobody knew that every morning she repeated the same quiet prayer. "God, just help me get through today." Royal Hope Medical Center stood like a palace of glass and steel. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Executives walked confidently through automatic doors. Private patients arrived wearing designer clothes. Amina entered through the staff entrance at the back. She changed into her cleaning uniform. One of the senior cleaners laughed. "You're early again." "I like finishing before visitors arrive." "You work too hard." Amina smiled. "I just like doing things properly." As she pushed her cleaning cart down the hallway, she greeted everyone she passed. Some smiled back. Most ignored her completely. Too many people. She wasn't Amina. She was simply the cleaner. Near the reception desk, an expensive handbag suddenly slipped from a wealthy woman's shoulder. Several bundles of cash scattered across the polished floor. Amina immediately bent down to help. Before she could hand them back, the woman snatched the money away. "Don't touch my things." "I'm sorry," Amina replied quietly. "I was only trying to help." The woman looked at her uniform with disgust. "People like you always have sticky fingers." Several visitors laughed. Amina lowered her eyes and quietly returned to work. One of the security guards watched the exchange from across the lobby. He shook his head. "She didn't deserve that." Another cleaner whispered. "She's used to it." At the same time, an old taxi stopped outside the hospital. An elderly man stepped out wearing simple clothes, worn leather shoes, and a flat cap. Beside him stood only one man. His lawyer. "Are you certain you don't want security?" the lawyer asked. The old man smiled. "If they know who I am, they won't show me the truth." The lawyer sighed. Your children would never approve. They don't need to know. The elderly man looked up at the hospital sign. Royal Hope Medical Center. The hospital he had founded over 40 years earlier. Thousands of people believed he spent his days resting in his mansion. Instead, he had come to see how ordinary patients were truly treated. His name was Kofi Mensah. And almost no one would recognize him dressed this way. Inside the hospital, Kofi deliberately joined the long queue for general patients. No special treatment. No VIP entrance. No private doctors. Just another old man waiting his turn. Hours passed. Some staff were kind. Others barely looked at him. One receptionist sighed impatiently. "You'll have to wait." "I understand." He quietly returned to his chair. From across the room, Amina noticed. She walked over carrying a bottle of water. "Sir." He looked up. "You've been sitting here a long time." She handed him the bottle. "You should drink some water." He smiled warmly. "Thank you." She hesitated. "I know it's not much. It's more than enough." Before walking away, she noticed his shoelace had come undone. She knelt without saying a word and tied it. Kofi watched her carefully. Very few people had treated him with such simple kindness in years. Not because he was rich, but because they believed he was poor. Later that afternoon, Kofi quietly placed his wallet on a waiting room chair before walking away. From the corner of the hallway, his lawyer observed. Several people walked past. One man picked it up, opened it, looked inside, then quickly slipped it into his own jacket. The lawyer frowned. Minutes later, Amina noticed the wallet lying partly hidden beneath the chair. She opened it only enough to find identification. There was no phone number, no address, just a hospital visitor pass. She immediately asked the reception desk. "Has anyone reported losing a wallet?" "No." She carried it from department to department until she spotted the elderly man searching his pockets. "Sir." He looked up. "I think this belongs to you." He accepted it with both hands. "You didn't check how much money was inside." She smiled. "If it isn't mine, why would I?" For the first time that day, Kofi laughed. Not loudly. Just enough for the lawyer to notice. The old man whispered. "Interesting." As evening approached, the hospital became busier than ever. Doctors rushed between operating rooms. Visitors crowded the corridors. Phones rang endlessly. Amina was finishing the final section of the East Wing when she heard something hit the floor. She turned. The elderly man she had helped earlier had collapsed beside his wheelchair. His breathing was shallow. One hand clutched his chest. His medication had rolled several feet away. People froze. Some stared. Others assumed a doctor would arrive. No one moved. Amina dropped everything. "Somebody call a doctor." She knelt beside him. "Sir, can you hear me?" His lips trembled. Barely able to speak, he whispered. "My pocket." She found the small emergency tablets and remembered the first aid training the hospital had given every employee. Keeping him calm, she administered the medication while shouting for help. Within seconds, nurses and doctors rushed into the corridor. One physician looked at Amina. "You bought him enough time." The medical team wheeled him toward the emergency department. As the doors closed behind them, Amina finally exhaled. She picked up her fallen mop. She assumed that would be the last time she ever saw the old man. She couldn't have been more wrong. Late that night, Kofi slowly opened his eyes in the intensive care unit. His lawyer leaned forward in relief. "You scared us." Kofi's voice was weak. "The young woman. The cleaner." "Yes." She saved your life. A faint smile crossed the old man's face. After a long silence, he whispered 5 words that would change everything. Find that young woman, quietly. Morning sunlight filtered through the curtains of the private hospital suite as Kofi Mensah slowly opened his eyes. Machines beeped softly beside his bed, reminding him how close he had come to losing everything the previous evening. His lawyer, Samuel, was already waiting. You should be resting, Samuel said. Kofi smiled faintly. I've spent too many years resting. Samuel handed him a folder containing the medical report. The doctor said if the young cleaner hadn't reacted so quickly, your heart would have stopped before anyone reached you. Kofi closed the folder without reading another word. I want to know everything about her. Samuel raised an eyebrow. I already had someone ask around. And? Her name is Amina Youssef. 28 years old. She's worked here for almost 6 years. What else? Samuel hesitated. She has never received a disciplinary warning. Kofi nodded. Go on. She lives with her widowed mother. No husband. No. No criminal record. Nothing. Samuel looked confused. I still don't understand why you're interested. Kofi looked through the hospital window toward the busy streets below. Saving my life caught my attention. He paused. But that's not why I want to know her. That same morning, Amina arrived for work expecting an ordinary day. She had no idea that someone was quietly watching her. Not to judge her, but to understand who she truly was. Around lunchtime, Samuel approached Amina while she cleaned the outpatient waiting area. Excuse me. She looked up politely. Yes, sir. The gentleman you helped yesterday would like to thank you. Oh. She smiled. I'm just glad he's all right. He asked if you would visit him. Amina looked uncomfortable. I'm still on duty. I've already spoken to your supervisor. She reluctantly agreed. When she entered the hospital suite, she barely recognized the elderly man. He looked healthier after treatment. Good afternoon, she said softly. Kofi smiled. You came. I only wanted to check that you're feeling better. I'm alive because of you. She shook her head. The doctors saved you. They saved me because you acted first. Silence filled the room. Finally, Kofi reached into a drawer and removed an envelope. I'd like you to accept this. Amina immediately stepped back. I can't. It's only a small gift. I wasn't helping you for money. Samuel watched carefully from the corner. Most people would have accepted without hesitation. Kofi insisted once more. Please. Amina smiled warmly. If you really want to thank me. She pointed toward another elderly patient visible through the window. Buy lunch for someone who can't afford it. Kofi stared at her. Then slowly placed the envelope back into the drawer. For the first time in years, someone had refused his money. Later that afternoon, Kofi decided to leave his room for a short walk. Without telling Amina, he carried out his first real test. As they passed through the hospital gardens, he quietly removed an expensive gold wristwatch and let it slip onto a bench. It was worth more than Amina earned in 3 years. He continued walking. A few minutes later, Amina noticed something sparkling behind her cleaning cart. She picked it up. Her eyes widened. This must belong to that gentleman. She hurried through the gardens until she found him sitting beneath a tree. Sir, you dropped this. Kofi accepted the watch. You never wondered how much it was worth? She laughed softly. I only wondered how worried you'd be after losing it. Samuel exchanged another glance with Kofi. Neither man spoke. Over the next several days, Kofi remained in the hospital longer than necessary. Officially, the doctors wanted to monitor his recovery. Unofficially, He wanted to observe Amina. Without her knowledge. He noticed small things nobody else seemed to notice. Every morning she greeted every cleaner by name. She carried heavy supplies for older workers. She often skipped her own lunch to help patients find their departments. One afternoon she found a frightened little boy crying alone outside the radiology department. Instead of walking past, she knelt beside him. "Are you lost?" The child nodded through tears. "My mommy disappeared." Within minutes Amina had found hospital security and reunited the boy with his mother. The grateful woman hugged her tightly. Amina simply smiled and returned to work. Kofi watched everything from the end of the corridor. He whispered. Character reveals itself when nobody expects a reward. Meanwhile, inside the Mensah family mansion, things were very different. Daniel sat confidently at the head of the dining table. "When father dies, the board will obviously appoint me." Vanessa laughed. You've nearly bankrupted 2 divisions. Brian interrupted. "Why argue? We'll sell the company and split the money." Daniel slammed his fist onto the table. "The company stays with me." Vanessa rolled her eyes. Typical. None of them asked how their father was recovering. Not once. Their concern wasn't his health. Only his fortune. Several days later, Kofi invited his children to visit him. They arrived dressed elegantly. Each carrying expensive gifts. Each pretending to be deeply concerned. The moment Kofi stepped into the bathroom, they began arguing. Daniel whispered. "Did father mention changing the will?" Vanessa shook her head. "He wouldn't dare." Brian smirked. "He knows better." Standing quietly outside the slightly open door, Kofi heard every word. His expression slowly changed. Not anger. Disappointment. Deep disappointment. That evening he called Samuel. "It's time." Samuel understood immediately. "The new will?" "Yes." "Are you certain?" "I've never been more certain." Samuel carefully placed several legal documents on the table. Kofi signed each page slowly. Then he stopped. "I want one more thing." "The letter." Kofi shook his head. "A video." The following afternoon cameras were quietly set up inside his room. Kofi looked directly into the lens. "If you're watching this, I am no longer alive." He smiled sadly. "My family will probably believe I made a mistake." "I didn't. I have spent my life building hospitals. But hospitals are not built by money. They are built by people who care." He paused. "And I found someone who truly cares." The recording ended. Samuel carefully locked the video together with the signed will inside a secure envelope. Across the hospital, Amina continued living exactly as before. She still rode the crowded bus. Still worried about her mother's medicine. Still cleaned floors no one noticed. She never imagined that somewhere inside the same building, her future had already changed forever. 1 week later, Kofi Mensah passed away peacefully in his sleep. News spread across the country within hours. Television stations interrupted their broadcast. Business leaders paid tribute. Employees cried openly. Amina stood silently in the hospital chapel after hearing the announcement. "I'll never forget his kindness," she whispered. She believed she had simply lost a grateful patient. Nothing more. 3 days later, the entire Mensah family gathered inside the company's magnificent boardroom. Directors filled every seat. Lawyers arranged thick files across the polished conference table. Journalists waited outside. Everyone expected Daniel to become the new CEO. Samuel entered carrying one sealed envelope. The room fell silent. He broke the wax seal. Removed the final document. Then suddenly, he stopped reading. His eyes widened. Daniel frowned. What is it? Samuel looked at the document again. Then slowly around the room. Finally he whispered. Mr. Mensah. Are you absolutely certain? The room froze. For a long moment, no one in the boardroom spoke. The silence felt heavier than the polished mahogany table that stretched across the room. Daniel leaned forward impatiently. Well, he snapped. What does it say? Samuel looked from the document to the faces surrounding him. Even after reading the sentence 3 times, he could hardly believe it himself. He slowly adjusted his glasses. Then read aloud. According to the final will of Mr. Kofi Mensah. The room held its breath. I hereby appoint Ms. Amina Youssef as the next Chief Executive Officer of Mensah Healthcare Group. Silence. Complete silence. Then, the room erupted. What? Daniel shot to his feet so violently that his chair crashed onto the floor. Vanessa stared at Samuel as if he had lost his mind. Brian burst into laughter. This has to be a joke. One of the directors carefully reached for the document. There must be some mistake. Samuel calmly handed him the papers. No mistake. It is signed. It has been witnessed. It has been legally registered. Daniel stormed across the room. Who is Amina Youssef? Nobody answered. One director quietly searched through the employee database on his laptop. After a few moments, he looked up. She's a cleaner. The room froze again. A cleaner. Vanessa whispered. My father gave $1 billion company to a cleaner. Daniel slammed both hands onto the table. I refuse to accept this. Across the city, Amina was scrubbing the floor outside the pediatric ward. Nothing about her morning felt unusual. She greeted patients, helped an elderly woman find the pharmacy, smiled at children passing through the hallway, completely unaware that every television station in the country was about to mention her name. Back inside the boardroom, Daniel pointed directly at Samuel. She manipulated him. Samuel remained calm. I expected that accusation. Vanessa folded her arms. Then prove she didn't. Samuel reached into his briefcase. I can. He removed another sealed envelope. My client anticipated this exact reaction. Daniel laughed sarcastically. Oh really? Samuel nodded. He left additional instructions. He pressed a small button on a remote. The enormous television mounted on the boardroom wall came to life. Static flickered. Then, Kofi Mensah appeared on screen. The room immediately fell silent. Even Daniel stopped speaking. Kofi smiled gently into the camera. If you're watching this, I have already left this world. I know many of you will question my decision. So let me answer before anyone asks. He leaned closer to the camera. My children, I love you. But love and leadership are not the same. Daniel lowered his eyes. Vanessa swallowed nervously. Brian suddenly looked uncomfortable. The video continued. When I visited one of my hospitals, I did not go as the founder. I went as an ordinary old man. I wanted to discover how ordinary people were treated. His voice remained calm. What I found broke my heart. He described nurses ignoring patients, staff demanding unofficial payments, managers hiding problems from executives, directors exchanging uncomfortable glances around the room. Then Kofi smiled. But among all that, I found hope. A photograph of Amina appeared beside him. The young woman you know only as a cleaner. I watched her for days. I tested her many times. The family looked at each other. Daniel whispered. Tested. Kofi continued. I offered her money. She refused. I dropped an expensive watch. She returned it. I watched her comfort frightened children. I watched her defend workers who were bullied. I watched her skip lunch so another patient could eat. I watched her treat everyone with dignity. He paused. And she did all of this, believing no one important was watching. The room had become so quiet that the air conditioning could be heard humming overhead. Kofi looked directly into the camera one final time. You may believe I chose a cleaner. He smiled. No. I chose a leader. The screen went black. Nobody moved. Several board members quietly wiped tears from their eyes. One elderly director slowly stood. I've worked beside Mr. Mensah for 32 years. He looked toward Daniel. I have never known him to make a careless decision. Another director nodded. I support his final wishes. One after another. Hands began to rise around the table. Daniel watched in disbelief. You can't be serious. The chairman looked around the room. All in favor of honoring the founder's decision. Nearly every hand remained raised. Motion approved. Meanwhile, Amina had just finished her shift. She stepped outside the hospital carrying her warm backpack. Her old phone suddenly rang. Unknown number. She answered. Hello. Miss Amina Youssef. Speaking. My name is Samuel. I was Mr. Kofi Mensah's lawyer. She smiled sadly. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. There is something very important we need to discuss. I'm afraid you've called the wrong person. No. I assure you. I haven't. An hour later. A black luxury car stopped outside Amina's apartment building. Every neighbor stared. Children pointed excitedly. Someone stepped out and greeted her politely. She looked embarrassed. You really didn't need to come all this way. I did. He handed her an official envelope. She opened it. Read the first page. Then frowned. I think you've made a mistake. Samuel smiled. We haven't. She shook her head. I clean hospital floors. I've never managed a company. Samuel reached into his briefcase once more. This is the final letter Mr. Mensah wrote to you. With trembling hands, Amina unfolded the paper. Dear Amina. If you are reading this, I am gone. You probably believe I made the wrong decision. I did not. Companies can hire brilliant executives. They can train talented managers. But they cannot teach integrity. You already possess what most leaders spend a lifetime searching for. Never forget where you came from. And never become too important to notice those who clean the floors. Because great leaders are measured by how they treat the people everyone else ignores. Kofi Mensah. Tears slowly rolled down Amina's cheeks. She carefully folded the letter. I still don't know if I can do this. Samuel smiled. You don't have to know everything. You only have to lead honestly. The weeks that followed were anything but easy. News spread across Africa. Headlines exploded. Hospital cleaner named CEO of billion-dollar company. Social media erupted with debate. Some celebrated her. Others mocked her. Daniel immediately filed a lawsuit challenging the will. Vanessa claimed their father had been manipulated. Television commentators questioned whether a cleaner could run a multinational healthcare company. Amina watched every headline quietly. Then turned off the television. She refused to answer a single insult. Months later, the court delivered its decision. The will was valid. The video. The witnesses. The legal documents. Everything confirmed Kofi's wishes. The challenge failed. For the first time, Daniel realized he had truly lost. On her first official day as CEO, hundreds of employees gathered in the headquarters lobby. Many expected expensive clothes, bodyguards, luxury jewelry. Instead, Amina arrived wearing a simple navy blue suit. The first thing she did surprised everyone. She walked directly toward the cleaning staff. They looked nervous. Then she smiled. "I used to stand exactly where you are." One elderly cleaner began crying. Amina hugged her. "I haven't forgotten." Over the next year, she increased cleaners' salaries, created scholarships for employees' children, opened free clinics in poor communities, introduced strict anti-corruption policies. Hospital waiting times dropped. Patient satisfaction reached record levels. Employees finally felt respected. The company became stronger than ever. One evening, Amina quietly returned to Royal Hope Medical Center. Not as CEO. Simply as Amina. She walked through the same corridor where an elderly man had once collapsed. The same polished floor. The same waiting chairs. A young cleaner hurried past carrying a mop. She looked exhausted. Amina smiled warmly. "How's your first week?" The young woman sighed. "I don't think anyone even notices us." Amina gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "They do." The cleaner looked confused. Amina smiled. "And even when they don't. Never believe your job determines your worth." She turned and walked toward the exit. Above the hospital entrance stood the bronze statue of Kofi Mensah. For a moment, Amina looked up at it. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she stepped into the evening light, leaving behind the place where her extraordinary journey had begun, not because she had been lucky, but because kindness, integrity, and quiet courage had finally been seen. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Subscribe for more unforgettable African stories filled with hope, justice, and unexpected twists. Until our next story, remember, kindness is never wasted.